Nazim Zaidi is starting record. Yeah.
Okay, so
Hmm. Yeah.
now we are going to discuss the chapter on research methods, which is chapter 3. And as we discussed last time, there are two types of data which are required, uh, uh, or two types of data which we can collect. So the first type is the primary data, and the second type is the secondary data. So what is primary data? Primary data is the data which we collect firsthand. It is the data which is collected when we go into the field. We use certain tools in order to collect the data, like questionnaires, survey, interviews, observation techniques, and experiments. But the main thing about primary data is that this is not pre-existing data. This is collected through your effort, and the data is original and it's collected in the field. The secondary data is the data which is pre-existing. It is derived from letters, newspapers, books, television, etc. Now, within primary data, you can have either quantitative data or qualitative data. And within secondary data, you can have qualitative data or quantitative data. So that's something that it's a qualitative and quantitative are subdivisions of both. So then what is quantitative data? Quantitative data is data in which the responses are converted into numerical values. So you can actually express the data which is collected in numerical terms. Whereas in qualitative data, uh, we rely more on descriptions, we rely more on feelings, we rely more on analysis of opinions. So that is the difference between quantitative and qualitative data. So the tools that we use are, as we discussed last time, the tools that we use are questionnaires. So what are questionnaires? Set of questions that are provided to respondents. In the yesteryears, these questions were either given by hand or they were posted to the respondents. And they contain, today we use the internet, Google Forms in order to collect information. So the questions that you put in the questionnaire, they can be closed-end questions or open-ended questions. Closed-end questions are those in which a set of predetermined answers are provided, and the respondent has to basically from those preset answers, predetermined answers. And in open-end questionnaires, you see the respondent is not restricted to his choice is not restricted to some predetermined answers. He can express his opinions, he can express his biases, he can express whatever he wants to in his answers. So those are open-ended. So, uh, so questionnaires definitely is it's a widely used tool, and it comes in handy. So the second thing is, the second tool of collecting data is interview. Now, what happens in an interview? In an interview, you basically, in a questionnaire, the questions are written. In the interview, ask questions of the respondent. And the interviews are of three types. They are the structured interviews. Now, in structured interviews, what happens is you ask the respondents, all the respondents are asked the same set of questions, and there is no variation in those questions. Whereas in the semi-structured interviews, what happens is there are some structured questions, but there are other questions which are unstructured. So some questions will be the same for all the respondents, other questions will vary. And then there are the unstructured interviews. In the unstructured interview, there are no prepared questions. The questions emerge as the interview progresses. So it's an emergent form uh, of collecting the information, and emergent form of uh, developing the question. Okay, and the idea here is to get detailed information about from the respondent about the subject, and this information then can be used for descriptive analysis. So this is a very qualitative way of approaching the subject matter, where the respondent is given a room to perform room to answer questions based on his opinions, and then we record his responses. Then we go to the next method, which is observation. So in observation, the main thing is that you see the behavior and then you record the behavior. The main thing here is that you become a witness to the sociological phenomenon and the sociological behavior which is emerging. So in sociological research, observation is more to do with qualitative, and the data will be rich in quality if it is observed. And then within observation, there is participant observation and non-participant observation. And within participant observation, then there are two types. So what is participant observation? In participant observation, the observer himself becomes part of the group that he's observing. And in overt participant observation, you become part of the group, and the members of that group know your purpose and your identity. Uh, they are informed that you are going to join their group and you're going to observe them. Whereas in covert participant observation, um, the, the the researcher will not reveal his true identity. All right, and the person who goes with this, the name that goes with this is James Patrick. Okay, and he undertook this observation, and the year is 1973. Then there is uh, this is covert participant observation, and then there is covert non-participant observation. What happens in non-participant observation? You uh, observe the group, but you observe it from a distance. You do not become part of the group. You're not participant in the group, and you are observing. In covert observation, you are observing, and you are not letting people know that you are observing them. And then there is overt non-participant observation. In overt non-participant observation, you are not part of the group, but the members of the group know that you are observing them and there is a purpose. You do not hide your identity, you do not hide your purpose. And the classic example of this are the Hawthorne investigations, which took place in the early 1930s, where Elton Mayo observed a group of workers working in the Hawthorne industries, but he was not part of the group. It was non-participant, but he did inform them that what his identity was, and that he was going to observe them with a purpose. And then the next method that we can use is experiments. So now, what is experiment? So experiment is the process in which we undertake to validate a hypothesis. Okay, we undertake to validate a hypothesis, and this is basically derived from the hypothetical deductive approach, which we know about, and directly this has been derived from the experimental sciences. The main thing here is that experiments in science are conducted in laboratories, but the experiments here in sociology are hardly ever conducted in any laboratory. They are conducted in a social setting. All right. So, but when you're carrying out research, you need to keep one thing in mind, that you need to keep some ethical considerations in mind. And those ethical considerations are that for an experiment, do not encourage things like discrimination, or you want to observe discrimination. So do not encourage that kind of behavior. These things need to be kept in mind because the ethics are important. And then there are pilot studies. Pilot studies are uh, where a study is conducted on a small scale first, and then it is expanded on a bigger scale later on. So this is pilot study, and then there are longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies are studies which take place over a long period of time, extended period of time, on a certain group, and you are observing that group over a long period of time. It can be months, it can even be years. So what is the purpose here? The purpose is to witness first-hand changes in the group. So qualitative data is collected over several years of observation, as in the as if you as Douglas did when he was sorry, what the Parker did when he was observing the effect of aging on youth behavior. All right, so this is another method, and then there are case studies. Now, in a case study, uh, the longitudinal study is rather extensive. It takes a group and then it observes it over a long period of time. Whereas in a case study, a subject is taken and an intensive study is done. All issues related to that particular case is analyzed in depth, and then you obtain detailed information about these groups. And then there is content analysis. So content analysis is when you analyze social life, when you try to sort of capture the history of society by analyzing what? By analyzing documents related to the media, or things related to the media, because that is where the real history of, or the real variables of sociological evolution, they can be found, and they can be pinpointed. Um, so that brings us to the concept of audience analysis. Um, when you're talking about the median, when you're talking about content analysis, you also have to take the audience into account. It is an attempt to ensure that information is conveyed to the intended audience at the appropriate level. And then there is, of course, something that we have already discussed, and that is semiology. So semiology is associated with signs and the language of sign language. Um, um, the signs are made up of signifiers and signified. So that is the important term that you have to keep in mind. So what is a signifier? Signifier is the way the object is thought when it is mentally recited. When it's, what do you think about an object? How does it conjure up images in your mind? So that is the signifier. And the meaning is created through the signifier. The meaning of the phenomenon then is created through the signifier, where signified is the concept. The thing indicated by the signifier is the signified. So so that brings us to the concept of the language. Whenever we are talking about sign language, then we will obviously come to language. What is language? Means of communication, and it is, language is both. It can be spoken, it can be written. So and words are the important elements in language. uh, why is language important? Language is important to sociologists because it conveys important cultural cues about society. Okay, if language is good, if language is sophisticated, that would probably prove that society itself is at a high level of sophistication. Whereas if the language is rough, the language is not very evolved, then that means society itself will not be highly evolved. So that is an important thing that language conveys to us. We then move to mass media, semiology. And a major branch in semiology is the mass media, because mass media uh, carries the codes which universally convey the same meaning. Um, and all encoded messages in the media, they are all conveying certain meaning, though all those coded messages are not decoded in the, okay, so can come about a certain event, but two people watching the same news can decode it in different ways. And that gives us cues about diversity, ethnicity, ageism, feminism in society. For example, the news that is coming about the Aurat March and all those things, coded in a certain way, it's being received by different audiences and it's being decoded in different ways. So, so then, of course, we go to documents. And this is where we are moving towards secondary research. So documents, pieces of written research. Now these can be, these days they can be electronic records, they can be typed records, they can be written records. Okay, historic documents. I mean, today if you are giving SAT, you know that in SAT there's an entire section which is based on historical dialogue between peoples also. So that's important. It's record, and records give, especially records become uh, contribute to qualitative interpretation of history, somebody's life document, somebody's letters. This is very important when it comes to sociological research. And then there are of course statistics. Official statistics are a very important source of secondary data. Okay, so and they do allow us, these statistics allow us to compare different sociological groups over a certain period of time. Especially these statistics are used by the government when reporting and analyzing crime. All right, though the Marxists. Now let's apply the different theories. In fact, what I'll do is I'll continue, and then later on I'm going to discuss. And in the next video, then I'm going to move towards research design and the stages in the research design. And after that, I'm going to link this with um, the I'm going to link these methods with the various theories that we have looked into. Okay, thank you very much indeed.